Well, good evening to you and welcome to this program of Walter Rodney Groundings. I'm your host, Dion Abrams, and on the program with me this evening is my usual guest, Brother Tackuma Ogunseye, and together we'll be talking about current issues in the news. Welcome to the program,
It's
Brother
always a
Tackuma.
pleasure to be here in the studio so that we could continue the work.
Yeah, well, it's good to be here and to be talking with you. The students are back in school. Easter is just around the corner, so school will be closed on Friday next week. But what are your thoughts on the way uh, the strike was ended and the current impasse again between the government and the Guyana Teachers Union?
Okay, I think the strike ended in a way that was unexpected in terms of the intervention of the court and the ruling of the Judge Kissoon. But I think once the court have given that ruling, I think the union and the workers, you know, was well advised, to try to work with the ruling of the court. So for me, I don't have no difficulties in understanding the choices that they made at that point in time. The more concerning thing is the government's attitude, having agreed to restart the negotiations through a mediation process at the court. Their representatives went there and they agree on certain things, which is reflected, you know, and it's a good thing that the union leaders insist that they
In,
have notes. And the notes reflected that the government agree with the union that they will begin the negotiations from 2019 onwards. And soon after, even before the ink was dry, the government began to backstep. And the government attitude at the last meeting is very clear. They declare the hostility to that. They said they're not going to deal with it because of COVID and all kinds of nonsense. And so they're acting in contempt of the court, in my view. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that they're acting in contempt of a court. But they're demonstrating their profound political hostility to any commitment to improve the livelihoods of teachers and by extension, the livelihoods of working people. This government seems to believe that working people, and particularly certain sections of the working people, and I have to make this point, they seems to believe that areas where Africans find themselves, they ought not to be in a position to enjoy any significant enumeration in the forms of wages and salaries. And this is an open hostility. It's a continuation, not only of the hostility to the teachers as a group, and the teachers to some extent is multiracial because there is significant Indian participation, Amerindian participation. But I think the government policy, I think those the Amerindian teachers and the Indian teachers are collateral damage. I think that the government's target and main hostility is directed to the African section of the teachers and generally the labor force. And the others are collateral damage. And I think that the union is correct in issuing the government an ultimatum indicating its intention that is they're prepared to go back on the roads. And more important, I think they're correct to go back to the court and to seek, an action of a ruling of the court, on the government's behavior. I think that we say we are a society based upon the rule of law, and the government behavior is a clear manifestation that they don't have any respect for the rule of law, or they only are prepared to respect the rule of law when it suits their political and other interests. And I think that the teachers are correct to go to the courts, but more importantly, they have to reorganize and they have to prepare themselves for after Easter. And if necessary, they have to go back to the streets. They will have to go back to the streets. They have to see this as a process in the struggle. The struggle takes different forms at different points in time.
But, you know, many people, when the strike was called off, you lauded the teachers, the union and so on, because it's a decision of the court. But I don't think that people were concerned that the court decided that they should have a mediation process. What people were concerned about is the fact that, well, coming out of the process, you know, they agreed to these talks, but the trust of the government was called into question. That you came out of the mediation with basically with nothing, except that you're going to negotiate, begin the negotiations again. How do you view the concerns of residents who were doubting the commitment of the government that they are going to honor any agreement that says, well, look, these teachers struck in for 2023 salaries because of the 6.5 that was given to them, that there would be any consideration for the improvement in even the 2023 remuneration and going back to 2019. Is this government, in any sense, a government that keeps its word ever?
No, but we know that the government is not a government that keeps its word. And I think the teachers' union leadership knows that. The entire country knows that.
Okay.
You know, so that to me was never a matter of serious contention. The question about struggle is that the union opted to go to the court, and if the union opted to go to the court, and the court, you know, give a ruling, you know, make a record, the unions are hard pressed not to ignore the courts. You can't have it both ways. If you choose, you know, judicial litigation, then you're tied to some extent by that. So once the court ruled, and the court ruling wasn't in any way hostile to the interests of the workers. So I think that they had no other the choice but to give it a try, knowing very well that the PPP will behave the way it is behaving. But you see, in politics and in life, if I say the PPP would have done that, there could be all kinds of argument by PPP people, how you know your prejudice, you know, you all always got a mindset of a certain thing, but the facts demonstrate it. So sometimes, even though you know, and you could predict the behavior of the other side, you have to sometimes allow it to be demonstrated. So persons, not only, because maybe politics is not about what's happening in your sector. It's not only about how the teachers feel, but how other people outside the teaching profession who are potential allies of teachers, how they feel on the engagement too is important. So you have to use the struggle to alter the political, you know, environment of the engagement. And I think that they did the right thing. Let the government expose itself. There's nobody now could have any argument of the lack of good faith by this government. And no court could, I don't think no court would side with the government. So from here onwards, the government either got to retreat or continue down its destructive role.
But the contention by Priya Manik Chand and Jack Dew and the PPP is that the union is being unreasonable to ask them to negotiate from 2019. They're not even talking about negotiations for 2023, 2022. The government is adamant that everything in the past must be set aside and that they are negotiating for 2024. So what was the purpose of the strike in the first place?
Well, the purpose of the strike is what the unions articulate. But it's not the government. In collective bargaining, no one side could decide, you know, how the process should be unfolded. So whatever the government thinks, that's the government view. What the union feels, the union view. But collective bargaining is that you bargain and try to come to some kind of, you know, civilized compromise. So I don't care where the government want to start. The union is clear where they want to start, and it is a battle. And as at present is in the court will probably, you know, have a saying as whether the union, is correct in the attitude, and I think they're very correct. There's no one side can't tell the other side, this is where you want to start from. Even if you do that, you will accept in the context that this is your initial position. But that is not necessarily your real position. Because we know in these processes, nobody don't raise exactly what they want at the beginning. You give yourself space for negotiations. So the point I'm trying to make is that in principle, I'm not worried about where each party starts. I'm saying that each party has the right to start where they want to start, and the union is quite right to start where they want to start. The government say they want to start from their position, but their position is totally unreasonable.
No, they're saying the union is unreasonable.
No, but I'm saying the government position is totally unreasonable because they're trying to tell the union that you give up all your rights and come and negotiate from my position of comfort. And that is against the spirit of collective bargaining. And that is just using state power to erode the working people. And the workers got to fight back against that. You can't encourage a state acting as an employer to behave in that way. Then open the door for the private sector employers also to do the same thing.
Yeah, well, you know, the question of not having monies, the budget did not cater for that. You wonder sometimes, you spoke about the way they view certain sections of the society, particularly in the public service, and the direct targeting of those individuals, and I know that you're talking about Afro-Guyanese people. Now you are in this situation with the union, bargaining for people's livelihoods, teachers' livelihoods. They talk about the importance of teachers. Jagdio is educated because of teachers. Priyamanik Chand is educated and miseducated, right, by her own design, and all the others, Nandalal. And yet they demonstrate this contempt. They don't want to pay. But you read in the papers that $178,000, you know, you have that being spent at a hotel in the Essequibo. The newspaper alleges that it's Jacobin's hotel, to house 9 rooms for training medical personnel. And that is over, each room is $18,000 per day. Now that money is going into one private individual's pocket. And this is going to amount to millions of dollars. This is not an isolated incident in terms of how the government is disposing of the state's assets in relation to people who are more likely than not aligned to them in some ways. So how do we factor the attitude to dispensing with monies in that fashion and talking about not having monies for teachers?
No, the government attitude is very clear. There's no issue in Guyana about money. Money is not the issue. And we should not allow the government to get preoccupied in nonsensical arguments. It is not about money. We have more money than we could spend. And the argument about the budget and everything, those are convenient nonsense. And like too long we allow Jagdio to define the narrative in the way that suits them. You know? But the more important concern is the political attitude of the government to the African Guyanese section of the workforce. I mean, that is where, to me, we have to struggle to convince people who may feel that we are just unnecessarily playing up the race card. But I don't think there's nobody in the right mind will argue that the government can't find money to pay teachers. Even the most rabid PPP person, deep down in their mind, they know that this is not a money matter. And since it's not a money matter, it's what kind of matter? It's a political matter. It is tied up, and the example you've given, they are finding money and spending money in areas of the economy that gives their support base and their friends and their cronies, okay, money. So money is not the issue. But you see, they are making political calculations. You see, they're making political calculations. They convince themselves that the best way to keep the African people, okay, in a position of little resistance is to impoverish them. And they're also making the calculation that, look, if we keep them in this situation, when elections is near, and we begin to dole out money to sections of the African community, we may get 5 or 2% of them willing to vote for us based upon the bribery, because the alternative is poverty. So I'm saying that this is a deliberate attempt by the PPP to achieve a political objective. And the opposition and the African community has to respond appropriately politically. And don't get sidetracked with the arguments that there is no money. There's more money than we could spend.
It's the political response that you're talking about. So far in the strike, a lot of what we've had is, a lot of what I would say lip service to the struggle of the teachers. I have not seen any concrete demonstration politically in relation to action in support of the strike. We may talk about it. A lot of what happened is just as we're talking here about it and our concerns and our views and so on. What concrete decisions, actions, politically, can make this government understand that this is beyond the teachers, that this is a national concern?
No, it is the duty. You see, I don't want to sound like I'm being critical of the opposition at present, because it's easy to be criticizing them. But I'm trying to be objective, trying to see what objectively an opposition could do in this situation. Now, I think that objectively an opposition, whether you got a teacher strike or no teacher strike, the opposition has to define some red lines and begin to invest assets in making sure that if the government crosses those red lines, we throw everything we have at them. You see, I don't think the opposition is not in that mode. The opposition seems to be contented to take everything the government throw at them and the people and wait for 2025 to settle the scores. I think that is important. I think that is exactly how the people want it to be played, because they have all the advantages in the equation. But I think objectively, if I was in charge of opposition politics, whether there's a teacher strike or not, I got my clear red lines. And more so if there's a teacher strike and the government is treating the teachers or any section of the workforce, whether the sugar workers, the public sector workers, in a certain way, I got a number of grievances with the government. Okay? And I will begin to mobilize on the basis of those grievances. I ain't touching the teachers or the sugar workers strike. Those workers and the unions are capable of handling the business. But I change in the political atmosphere environment that could help them by pressing all the other story. You block down people's house and mock. You do this, you do that. And I'm mobilizing people from the road to deal with the outstanding matters that we got. So you're getting pressure from the teachers or the public service or the sugar workers who at the moment is in engagement with you. But as an opposition, I acting politically and adding more pressure to you. And I think that is the role of the opposition in these situations. But because the opposition is so committed to electoral politics and they define electoral politics in a certain way, and I think that, I don't want to go there, but I'm telling you, that a judgment has to be made about the quality and the dispensation and the political temperament of opposition leaders, which is important. The temperament of Jack Dio and the PPP leadership is clear. They understand the use of power. They're vicious. They're prepared to drive the opposition, the people, to the brink, But the opposition approach to date is tame response. And I haven't seen in any section of the opposition, and more so in the major section of the opposition, which is the parliamentary opposition, which is the PNC, PMU, AFC, which constitute the majority, there's where the people throw their support. I look down the leadership, both present leadership, future leaders, and I doesn't see any indication of any section of the opposition seems to be of the temperament to engage in what is necessary, to bring about change. You see, if you take developed political parties like even the Labour Party in England and so on, while a party leadership and activists are bound to support whatever is the principal direction the party agree to, you listen to the dissenters, you could see they have a clear alternative approach to the present party line. I haven't seen an alternative approach to the present party line coming from the PNC, the APMU, or the AFC. And I think that is problematic because it is one thing, to be critical of the established leadership, internally, but externally you have to give people some sense of direction where you differ and what is your alternative line of march, so that people have something to work with and to measure. But this is what's absence in this equation. As I tell you, to answer your question and repeat again, what is necessary is for the opposition to pursue its legitimate grievance like GCOM. We got big grievance with the government over GCOM, which is important. We got grievance with the government over the voters list, which is important. We have major grievance with the government over how they're spending the oil money. Now, even if you take those three alone, those are so major and interrelated that opposition, should be able to exploit those with a snap of a finger. And nobody in the world could tell you that if you put pressure, you start to rock the boat, the country boat on those matters, that you're doing disservice to the country.
So this non-opposition, as we can define it, does it in many ways embolden Jack Dio and Mandela?
Of course. If any PP sneeze, the opposition get flu on God in the bed, they must feel emboldened. You remember the PP logic. And I keep telling people, the PP is not stupid, The PPP is weighing its options and weighing how far it could push the situation politically. And it knows anytime the opposition decides to change course instead of fighting a certain way, the PPP knows it have to make the necessary adjustments. But to the extent that the opposition is not prepared to shift, the PPP will say, why should we shift? And I think that is basically what is happening in this equation. You don't have to be a great political scientist to work it out.
So is Jack Dio playing on the decadence of the opposition when he mouths all these threats? He threatens the social media commentators. He's threatening others at Babu John that he's going to deal with them, mouthing a lot of, threats and intimidation, and which is extending beyond the opposition, but also a threat to the nation, that anybody who attempts to go against the government, politically or otherwise, that he is going to deal with them. I mean, how do we?
They're just shouting wolf, wolf, wolf. We allow Jack Dio shouting wolf, wolf, wolf. I mean, you're not going to expect Jack Dio to tell or encourage an environment of resistance and opposition to the government. He logically, from his position and the kind of politics he's pursuing, he always have to raise the banner of threat and intimidation. And he's not so much intimidating the opposition leadership per se. Mm-hmm. He's really intimidating the opposition support base, because he knows very well that Norton and company is not that intimidated by his threats. Norton and company are are restricted in their response by the own unwillingness to make a certain amount of kind of sacrifice at the personal level. You know, politics and struggle got personal discomforts. You can't want to sleep in your house every night when you're bed and behave a certain politically. You can't want not to go in the lockup, you know. And if you can't find, you get insulin tablets, or you can't find wherever you got forget, you got these things got personal things, and more so, the parties like the PNC and the AFC, they got to deal with the donors who pay the piper called the tune. And if you have a lot of Indian businessmen financing those parties, and the Indian businessmen judgment is that, look, they don't want you to rock the boat because it's going to affect their business, and the PP know that they give you money, and the PP going to intervene, and therefore you depend upon the money, then it influences your politics. You see? I see, I underscore, since I saw it recently, I got to say it since I'm talking about opposition and money. Norton, in some statement recently, was making a point that the PNC don't get money from big business. Okay, they get money from the party, you know, being supported mainly at this point by the membership and the supporters and small business people. So he's given the assurance that he is not in the hand of big business. But the point I'm making is that parties' action, whether they will be militant, the way we want them to be militant, is judged by a number of factors. One, the temperament of the leadership. If you got a leadership that doesn't want to get locked up, then it will behave in a certain way. If you got a leadership that a party that is dependent upon a significant amount of money outside your constituency, that very fact influence, you know, your behavior. So if you got a party that is listening to people who tell you that the way to deal with the PPP is to fight for crossover votes on way 2025, and you believe that, you can behave in a certain way. So, you know, so the behavior is complex. But at the end of the day, what is important to any political group and their support base is results. I mean, if Norton or the PNC or the APMU or a combination of APMU, AFC, behave the way they behave at present, and in 2025 they could win the elections, then you can't row with them. You got to say they read it right. But we won't know that until 2025. So that's how politics is being conducted.
All right, this we've gone around. So all of this is in relation to the teachers' strike and the government's response to the population and to the political opposition. Now, should the union decide that it's going to call out its teachers again, what are your thoughts and what message would you send to the teachers who will be called upon to take militant action again in their own interest?
Well, there's only one thing you could tell them, that if they're serious about their livelihood, they got to respond. They have no other choice. When you're in the level of poverty and you're getting that kind of battering from your employer, you don't got no much of a choice, you know. And their best bet is to engage in struggle. So I would say to them that you have to answer your call, and you have to believe in your own conviction that, look, you could win this thing, you know. And you know, so you have to start there. You see, struggle always starts with the persons who are directly involved. I can't get a greater commitment to your struggle than you. But if you have a greater commitment to your struggle and you're prepared to pursue your struggle, you stand a good chance of attracting other people to respond to you in solidarity and come out and make sacrifice with you. But it all starts with you. If you say you're feeling pain and suddenly you decide that you're feeling pain and you're going to fight no more, well, you answer your question. You could use Banwara, you could bear your chief, and you will continue to bear your chief until when there's no more. These things are simple, straightforward matters. You don't have much space in the equation. The teachers don't have much space. They're not business people. where they got problem, they could find a way of robbing the consumers, raising the prices, for the goods, and they got a lot of space for maneuver. They're trapped into the wage slavery business. So if they believe that they're being cheated and they believe that they deserve higher pay, they have to come back on the road if once it becomes necessary and prepare to wage the battle to the end.
You talk about support, the commitment of the teachers, generating support in the wider section of the society. Now, do you think that teachers got adequate support from the ordinary citizens across the country in this strike that they had there?
Well, the question of adequate support is a little tricky thing. But I would say they get significant support and they had a lot of goodwill. But the question, no, I think, I mean, sometimes you don't want to say these things because you don't want to think. But I think that Guyanese have reached a point where they want to win victories too quickly. Workers will strike for 3-4 weeks and they think that they deserve a victory. We have lost, to some extent, the capacity and the willingness to engage in protracted struggles. And sometimes, and dealing with this regime, you see, I keep saying over and over on this program what the PPP and JAGD have demonstrated. And JAGD is a master of it. Normally in the colonial days, much could achieve by simply picking up a placard and going out in front of Parliament and going by the Governor House and raise and complain in the media carry things and so on and so. I think may make some adjustments. Okay, so certain forms of struggle. Workers could strike, and within a week they strike the employer and so, make a necessary adjustments.
That happens with the sugar industry.
Yeah, right. But in terms of Jagdio's approach to the public sector workers and so, okay, because he is taking a political attitude to them, is that you ain't getting nothing through with no quick struggle. I stretching you, okay, to the extreme. Therefore, the African workers have to develop a capacity for protracted struggle. Okay, we know that the conditions socially probably doesn't make it easy. But when struggling with your point, no solution is easy. No solution is easy. You either prepare to do what you want to do to win, or you don't do it and die. No solution is easy. And I'm very concerned that workers tend to want to see the full solidarity they have in the country sometimes too quickly. You gotta let these things mature,
But I think, in saying that the strike was significantly helped by the parents themselves.
Yeah.
You look on the East Coast in the mornings, you don't get transportation to come to Georgetown, but parents struck with their children.
Yeah.
The children weren't going to school. So that even the teachers who were at school, they went to empty schools.
Yeah.
And we have to laud the parents for that kind of support. All right? And we have to call upon them again to demonstrate that willingness to support teachers.
And they will do it. But when people talk about adequate support, I think they're talking beyond that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it is the kind of thing where the TUC should be able to call a general strike.
Yeah.
Bring out other workers. I mean, that will fall more in the position of adequate support. I think the political opposition should have been keeping rallies, not necessarily on the strike, but on grievances, and then nobody's stupid. So if hundreds of people all over the place, all over the country, and discussing the political crisis in the country, that's support for the strike. And that is why we call adequate support. But in the absence of those two things, in absence of that from the political opposition, in the absence of the TUC calling a general strike, then the support that they got is significant but not adequate.
Well, I accept your qualifications in terms of adequate and not adequate. Now, we must go back to the Guyana Public Service Credit Union. And here again we see the government's deep involvement in an institution. that is supposed to be and has been chartering a course to help black people in the society. We spoke about this last time, and the court has ruled, and quickly, despite what was happening, because we know that the players are aligned in some way with the administration. So the elections were held, the old guard essentially lost the elections. At the meeting to swear in the new council and so on, they disrupted. And then they ran to the Ministry of Labor, which was pretty passive in the situation of the teachers' strike. They couldn't do anything, they didn't get involved. But quickly, the chief co-ops officer intervened in this situation and has basically gone against the ruling of the court and displaced the elected executive of that organization so that the old guard is back again parading. Now, what are your thoughts in that situation?
I must admit that I've not been following very keenly, but following I remember some of the things that you mentioned, but I didn't know. What I find surprising is to know that the old guard is back in control.
I saw them saying that there is a 2% dividend.
You know, so I don't know. I don't know how the co-op officer could remove the elected leadership and put back the old guard. I don't know physically how you could do that. I could know that he could rule that they're illegal and they're violation of the co-op rule and all them kind of things.
He asked them to produce evidence.
Yeah,
that
but I don't understand how he could remove them. You see, that's what I'm not too sure how to respond. But I will, if the new leadership allowed themselves to remove physically by that, then it speaks to what I'm pointing out. It's their commitment to struggle and the belief in yourself. Because if the other side is ignoring the court, the other side is engaging in bullyism, you only could counter that by countering bullyism in a certain way. And I am moving. And if you guys are fighting shed blood, then we're going to fight and shed blood. In the British Parliament a couple of years ago, they beat the fight that people blood shed. I mean, there come a point in time when you know the other side, they got no respect for laws and procedure. And they're digging the heels in. You got to dig your heels in if you want to be counted as a credible leadership. You have to fight for your people and fight for your positions. So if the new leadership allows themselves to be kicked out physically, well, I don't know what to say.
But I mean, you said it's a lack of respect for law and order, and the whole question of the apartheid state and the nature of this regime. All these scenarios that we're painting here, can they dispute the racism being exercised in this country?
Again, they will always dispute it, and it's their role to dispute it, you know, so I won't waste time with that. They will never admit that they're racist. They'll never admit that the policy is racist, you know. And my main point is that, you know, you don't fight over that because you can't, it's not where you have a genuine, legitimate difference in conception between you and the government. And a willingness, okay, of a government to adjust if it is convinced otherwise. This is now we're dealing with. The PPP know that its policy is racist. The PPP knows that it depends upon Indian votes and therefore it has to behave in a certain way. Well, you know how they shoot the sugar workers, how they treat the public sector workers. So they know their behavior. They know that 90% of the contract of the state going in Indo-Guyanese and to a lesser extent some Portuguese hands. They know the racial and ethnic consequences of these things. So you don't need them admitting that, and they will never admit it. So for me, what they think about themselves is neither here nor there. It's what we think about them and what we prepare to do to beat them to the senses. That is where the problem lies. I mean, look man, I struggle with the PPP against boredom dictatorship. And I struggled with them at a time when Africans never used to identify with the PPP. I sleep in a mosquito-infested PPP office in New Amsterdam, all kind of thing, waiting overnight for meetings the next day and all kinds of things. You know, and I was on platforms with them and so. So I would not waste me energies to ask the PPP if they believe they're racist, and especially this present leadership. You know, I know they will never admit their racism, and I don't need them to admit it. The action speaks louder than words. What is important is we to deal with their racism, and in dealing with their racism, they're going to come to their senses. That is how they're going to admit.
Mayor, I think the struggle, the use of the court, you were saying, apart from the court, that some other forms of resistance.
I'm saying clear, I'm saying this court is necessary for people who feel like they could win something out of the courts. I think you here. But I'm saying my political response is, and I've been making it all along. I said it during the local government elections. I said it before the local government elections, that you're only going to beat sense into the PPP by massive African and Guyanese uprising. This is where we reach in the engagement in the politics of the country. The contempt that the PPP as rulers have for the country, not only for black people, but the entire country. But since the country is an ethnically divided country, and I can't speak for the Indians, and I'm being very careful, I prepare to speak on the behalf of the Africans, and I prepare to fight African backwardness. Indian comrades and Indian activists, you got to fight some Indian backwardness and so. That is why I keep concentrating where I feel comfortable. And I don't want to interpret Indian behavior, how Indians feel about the government, and the Indian person will say, you know, you can't do it because you don't know how we feel. I think I understand the African feelings. When I could tell them, based on how they tell me the feelings, that you're up on stupidness because you're fighting back. Okay? So my point is that we have passed the position where those dependency upon the court and so becomes the main form of struggle. The main form of struggle to bring about change, it has to be street struggle, a major confrontation. Okay? Now, if you do that, you're going to find the dynamics changing up, and you find that the people in the government who feel, whether they believe it or they were acting conveniently, that the opposition can't get its people to fight, and the African community have been so beaten down that they can't fight. When they see you fighting, they're going to alter the perception of you, alter the perception of what is politically possible, and make the necessary judgment. And as I said, for me, I'm not interested in African domination, so to the extent that we push this button as far as it needed to be pushed, is to bring back some equity and balance in the equation and open up the possibility for real, unity in the country. That to me, that is the challenge facing any set of progressive politicians in this country, whether they want to call themselves revolutionaries, whether they want to call themselves conservatives, to the extent that they tell me that they got any nationalistic sense, they got any sense of Guyanese future, they must recognize that you only could begin to open up these possibilities through struggle, bringing people out in the numbers before the elections, to alter the PPP domination of GCOM, to alter the voters list, or to get biometrics to contain the rigging, and to get the PPP hands off the oil money, which they're prepared to use to corrupt the electoral process. I don't care what is your political dispensation ideologically. If politically you don't understand that those things that you're up against has to change, and it could only change through massive mobilization of people. So the world and the PPP could come under real pressure, okay? Then you're doing the disservice to the country, a disservice to your party, and disservice to yourself. You're doing disservice to Guyanese. That is where we are.
But I've heard, you have come from a period where there was a lot of talk and a lot of action towards revolution. Morris Bishop and all the others, even we can even talk about Mugabe. They were revolutionary. So we're not hearing any talk about revolution these days. In fact, I'm listening to people whom I looked up to as a young political activist growing up, people who talked about, getting rid of this regime because it's not good for the country. And now they're saying that we're not talking regime change. No. How can we you talk about change for bringing the nation together. With the likes of Jack Dio, what is your view about this whole revolutionary concept?
No, you see, I think we got to be careful. I think that we're not in a period internationally and globally for the traditional leftist revolution where
but people... We're having revolutions in Africa.
Yeah. But that's what I'm coming to. We're not in the tradition of the 70s and so forth and so forth. But I'm saying Guyana doesn't even need that kind of revolution. I'm not talking about that. The country is too racially divided to pursue that path. So I'm not, and the country, and to deal with the people doesn't require us that. I am talking about the normal political uprising and backbone that is being demonstrated in Sri Lanka and elsewhere in the states, in New York and European states, and on social and political issues. Remember, Guyanese are literally dead in the response to social and political issues. So the kind of pressure I'm talking is moving from a dead state to an active state. We comment with the Shikavari revolution or the Fidel revolution. We ain't there nowhere near that. We don't need them.
Just like we don't need Jagdeo.
Yes, we don't. So I'm saying to say you need a Shikavari revolution to move Jagdeo is to get Jagdeo a lot of political criticism that I don't ascribe to Jagdeo.
For me, it doesn't matter the criticism. The fact is that he's gotten rid of.
Yes, but I'm saying that the fact, as I told you, I don't even want to spend time on Jagdeo. Whether Jagdeo has gotten rid of politically or not, it's not me business. And it should not even be the African community business. He's an Indian leader, and if the majority Indian people see Jagdeo as their leader, so be it. It is a democratic choice. They can't tell me who to be me. African people not accept the people telling them that Norton is not their leader. And if they support Norton, so be it. Norton become the leader. So if Jagdeo have the support of the Indian people, okay, he's the Indian leader. I have no interest in getting rid of his Indians that get rid of even when time comes. But I got interest in containing his politics and to containing your oppression against me and my people and the country at large. That is my responsibility. If in the process he get rid of, so be it. But that is not my objective. Jagdeo fate lies with the Indian people, not in me.
Well,
in terms of
we're going to defend that.
Whether they get rid of he. But in political terms, to reduce his power and the political effectiveness is a different story. Yeah. That depends on me and you.
Yeah, well, the evils of the man for me,
Yeah, but see, we got to be careful, or else we end up just where the Israelis end up, in Gaza. You see, these things they start in the mind of the human beings. You see, once you want to replace the right of peoples to choose their leadership.
No, I'm replacing the right of anybody. I'm replacing the right of anybody. I am replacing Barrett Jagdeo because Jagdeo is just like Netanyahu. It's just that he ain't killing me again yet.
Yes, but I'm saying to the extent that half of the country support Jagdeo, you have to deal with the reality.
Yeah, but you still have to deal with the reality that the Israelis, they got factions of them.
Yes.
Right?
And the Palestinians, them dealing with it by engaging in war. Right. We reach a point where we're ready to engage in war. So I'm saying you have to deal with Jagdeo. That Jagdeo and the PVP leadership has to be with it. Okay, but I'm saying as an African activist, we got to be very careful. We're in an ethnically divided society which is split down almost half and a half. And one half of the country have no right to tell the next half of the country who the leadership should be.
I ain't telling them who the leadership should be.
one half of the country can't dominate the other half.
I am telling you,
And I
who's the
fighting
enemy of
against
my nation.
Yes, and I fighting against the PPP domination and Jagdeo the domination of African people in the country. That is why I think it. Whether he disappear as a political actor is a different story. Because we could achieve what we want, he still be the PP leader.
Yeah,
You know.
anyway, the popular belief is that once he's gone, that and the likes of Nandalal, that the country may see a different light. All right?
Well, the popular belief was once Borno was gone, the country is once on one side. Once Jagan is gone, the popular belief the country will be different and the country indifferent. So the popular belief,
We gotta
the popular
keep- we
belief
gotta
is the popular belief.
we
but,
gotta
you know,
we gotta keep working at it. It's
Yeah,
not,
yeah, but we got to-
you just said struggle is not an overnight
But
thing.
what I'm saying is we got to take cognizance of popular belief or popular interpretations, but we also have a duty to be more scientific. You know, it's like, you know, the popular belief of any illness might be, you know, you get AIDS, you know, by shaking somebody's hand. But we know scientifically you don't get AIDS by shaking anybody's hand. So there are going to be popular beliefs on politics and all kinds of things, which you take note of, but we have to be more clinical. I remember, we're the political practitioners. We like the medical practitioners, so we got to engage in science.
Anyway, the fact is, we're not going to go down that road for too long. But I still hold my view that, you know, agents of oppression, once they're dealt with, that change can come around.
I agree with you fully.
So,
I agree with you.
so
I
the Hitlers and the Mussolinis
Yeah.
and all of them,
Yeah.
right? Once the world got rid of them,
Yeah.
then there were changes, all right? And if another one raises his head, then the world has a right to,
The world.
right?
The world.
Our world,
Yeah.
our world.
The world.
In this case, our world, because we're talking about our politics, and we have a right, all right, to deal with that, to prevent the destruction of ourselves and our people,
Yeah.
all right? So, I mean, if he is the author of our discontent, then we have to focus on him and deal with him
Yeah, but
in ways that,
he is the author, not totally. You see, we have to be careful, you know.
yeah,
If
man,
Jack Dio died tomorrow, the PP behavior will not change overnight.
we don't expect it to.
Well, okay. So I'm saying, I don't want us to get false belief that simply believe that if Jack, Jack may die from natural cause. And all we could die from
Let me
natural
hope that
cause.
happens soon.
And it doesn't change nothing.
Let's
You might find that people get worse.
Sooner than
You might find that people be worse.
Okay.
You know, so the point I'm trying to get at, we shouldn't get too preoccupied with the individual.
I take your point on that, all right? But as regards this money, again, we go back to the money again. The Exxon has now discovered more oil-bearing grounds. And our monies are, we should wait until 2027, right? But yet, monies are being borrowed, and people are, I mean, advice is always being given against borrowing against resources that you have that you're not exploiting yet. But this government continues to borrow at the expense of the people, and without regard for the well-being of people in terms of their ability to live and exist in ways that make them comfortable. Now, all these discoveries, and yet no money. Where does that leave us?
Well, there's two issues here. The borrowing, there's two schools of thought on the borrowing. People will argue that it makes more sense to borrow now, okay, than to borrow later. It is cheaper to borrow now than to borrow later, you know. So the question is what you're borrowing for and whether you're managing the investments you make so that at the end of the day, when payback time comes, you have money to pay back, and you achieve, the objectives that thing. So borrowing in itself is not bad. And people argue that borrowing itself, when you know you got money to pay, you get better credit from your external borrowers, because they know you're not a high risk. You're not a high risk person, investor. It's not a high risk. Therefore, you will get money at a cheaper rate. So and people argue it makes more sense to capitalize on that rather than to use your own money. So there's one school of thought. But at the bottom line, whichever school road you walk, the question is the choice of the projects you invest, you borrow for, whether you manage it efficiently, whether you wipe out corruption out of the deal, whether they're really feasible, okay, and they could really deliver what you claim they can deliver, and whether they could actually bring about the kind of monies that you expect when the time to pay back. So that could be a tricky business. But the Exxon, every time we hear a new discovery, as a country, we have to be happy that we are finding more and more oil, which open up more and more possibilities for us going forward. And I think that this, if my memory goes right, this is Exxon, this is the 41, the discovery. They had 40 before, this is now gone to 41. And if my memory goes right, we only got 3 wells actually working. So when you look at the overall picture, and we have at this stage more money, the present rulers have more money at their disposal, both in the country and outside the country, than any set of rulers from slavery to present. And you only got 3 oil wells in production. Imagine what will happen when you got 10 oil wells into production. We have to try to let Guyanese get a grasp of the kind of money we're talking about that we have, and the kind of money we will get going forward. And I'm making this point to say that there is no justification for any section of the Guyanese community, whether it's African, Indian, Amerindian, whether it's workers, whether it's whoever, any section, whatever description you want to get them to accept from any government, including this government or any government or future government, that we have to continue to live with the level of poverty that we are living with, and that the government can't pay better wages, the government can't produce better health facilities and education, blah, 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 blah. There's no excuse for that. And we should be intolerant to that. Intolerant. Okay? But another important point in the Exxon discovery, which people have been raising, is that previously, every time they announce a discovery, they add to the total reserves that we have. Let me say, they find X, when there was the 20th discovery, they might say we had 7 billion barrels. And every time they make a discovery, they
tell you,
what is it?
Can get,
yeah,
what it can produce.
Right. And what the total picture look like. Now they stopped doing that. Neither the government or Exxon, is not now doing that. I could understand Exxon for selfish reasons not doing that. But I can't understand why this Guyana government is hiding that from the Guyanese population. It doesn't make sense. I could see Exxon playing games with our oil reserves because they're a multinational corporation, they're very selfish, and they may not want their competitors to have a good sense of what they're sitting on. But I can't see no good reason why the Guyana government will hide from the Guyanese people the value of the assets.
You can't see. You're dealing with. We just spoke about the nature of this government, the nature of the leaders of the government. Their whole intent and purpose in treating.
You're taking it too serious. I want to tell you that they do it because they want to thief you money, man. But I'm trying to be a little fair and reasonable. Since other people may be listening, PP supporters, other people neutral, you don't want to come over like those,
They're colluding. Right, to steal our money.
Right.
Well, we got to beat them now because we beat them up so much about Exxon and the 50% that they claiming that Jack Dew himself came out and condemned the billboards and saying that they should change it. Anyway, time has caught up with us.
So quickly, time has come so quickly on these programs.
Yeah, it's sad when people are so, nasty that you got to wish them death, but there's a point where people are saying in their hearts that this man, some lightning should strike him.
But see, my worry though is that when people say so, they excuse themselves from their responsibility to fight.
Okay.
And that's the worry I got.
Yeah. The nation will be a better place without the likes of Jack. It's been a pleasure having you once again on this program, and I look forward to being with you again next week, possibly. Next week, well, we wish
next
the
week.
folks.
Next week.
Yeah.
The other week might be more problematic.
Same time, same channel for another program of Walter Rodney Groundings. Do have a good night.